This podcast comes from the corner of a country lane in the middle of England.
Evening all, how's your family history project going? Hope you're not taking too much time off, because we're going to spend the whole of tonight's podcast exploring just one little detail of evidence to see how much we can get out of it. Tonight I want to show you how a single line in a medieval charter, barely a sentence long, can open up an entire world. We will not be drawing on any other evidence apart from the following lines. I, Matilda, niece of John of Claypole, widow of William of Horspool, have given, granted, and by this present charter confirmed to my daughter Isolde, for her homage and service, a part of my toft in the village of Hospel. That is 42 words.
The Talk Genealogy podcast looks at different techniques and interesting sources for family historians. Or perhaps a discussion about early genealogists, the pioneers of our science. Sometimes we look at how a famous character in history shows us something particular about genealogy. But hey, most of the time we talk about whatever comes into our head, building an audio library for genealogists with too much time on their hands.
Please remember, I'm not an expert or a professional. I'm an enthusiast like you, who has spent more than 40 years digging up his family tree, so often in the wrong place. And these episodes, well, they're really no more than me sharing with you what I have learned along the way. And I do want to emphasize, I am talking about ancestor hunting in England.
Recommended by Who Do You Think You Are magazine and featured on BBC Radio. Here is Malcolm Noble's Talk Genealogy podcast, the podcast for the genealogists with too much time on their hands. Here is your presenter, Malcolm Noble.
42 words. And at first glance it looks so simple. A mother giving land to her daughter. But as we begin to unpack the language, the order of names, the feudal formulae, and the social context, we discover a far richer story. One about women's authority, family strategy, and the structure of a medieval village. So let's take a walk through what this clause really tells us. The first thing we notice is how Matilda introduces herself. She does not begin with her marriage. She begins with her lineage, niece of John of Claypole. Now, this is deliberate. In medieval documents, people chose the identity that best established their status and their right to act. By naming her Claypole connection first, Matilda signals that the Claypole family is a more prominent lineage. Her right to the land may derive from that side of her family tree. Blood kingship outranks widowhood in establishing legal authority. Only after establishing her lineage does she add widow of William of Hospel. The widow is a current status, but lineage is permanent. So Matilda leads with the identity that roots her in a recognized landholding family. And that tells us something else. Matilda is acting with full legal capacity. She is not a placeholder for a male relative. She is the grantor, the landholder, the person issuing a charter. Next, we need to look at what she means by for her homage and service. Now, this is the very heart of the clause. It's easy to misread it with modern eyes, but in medieval legal language, homage and service has a very specific meaning. For a start, it's not as a reward for past service. She doesn't mean in thanks for all that she's done or in recognition of her loyalty. Medieval charters almost never use homage retrospectively. It's a future obligation. Homage is a ceremony. in which a tenant acknowledges a lord. Service refers to ongoing duties attached to the land. So Matilda is not simply giving land to her daughter, she is creating a tenancy. Isolde will owe homage, the formal act of becoming Matilda's tenant, and service, the customary obligations attached to the holding. This is her mother acting as a feudal superior. Matilda gives Isolde property, but retains legal superiority and establishes formal feudal relationships. This is not sentimental generosity, it is estate management.
Don't forget to download the episode if you want it for keeps. We're not monetized, so we can't maintain episodes in the internet forever. Why not think about downloading tonight's talk to your library? Did you catch some of our recent episodes? Episode 49 featured 3 Australian brothers, while episode 48 discussed Admiral Sir John Hawkins. Take Peeps, for example, was episode 30, while number 35 looked at marriage registers and 31 discussed church wardens. TalkGenealogy.com is the website that supports the podcast for genealogists with too much time on their hands. You find a guide to previous episodes, a list of books mentioned in the series, and now and then, a bit of a blog. And now, on with the episode.
Well, what does this tell us about the daughter, Isolde? Does it mean that she's over 21? Well, no, the clause actually tells us nothing about her age, at least at first glance. A minor can hold land. If she were underage, a guardian would perform the homage for her, and she would perform it herself when she reached majority. So the Charter does not tell us whether she is 12 or 16 or 25. And we can't pass over the significance of her name. Isolde is not a strange name, but it is unusual and fashionable. It enters English naming culture through the Tristan and Isolde romance tradition, which is a Celtic myth, if not a Pictish myth. The literary influence definitely comes from the Anglo-Norman facet. And this was the fashionable spread of romance names amongst the gentry. So it's likely, it seems to suggest that it's a family with cultural awareness, with access to literate circles, and a taste for fashionable names. This fits well with a household issuing written charters and managing land. So, what would this original grant of land look like? Even in small villages, land transfers were public, witnessed, and formal, because land was the very backbone of status, obligation, and inheritance. It was land that made the world go round. So was it just verbal? Certainly not. By 1250 to 1280, and we will see that that is the sort of ground that we're talking about, freehold transfers were almost always written, sealed, witnessed, and preserved. Wow, would the homage have been a physical act? Now, as far as I've been able to dig up, yes, absolutely. Homage was not just a legal formula, it was a bodily performance, a deeply symbolic one. The tenant, Isolde in this case, would kneel before the Lord, Matilda, and place her hands between Matilda's hands. Then she would say something like, "I'll become your woman from this day forward, of life and limb and earthly honour," or along those lines. Matilda would then raise her up physically and kiss her. Fealty might follow, a separate oath, usually sworn when on a book or a relic. Would the fact that it's mother and daughter have made no difference? Absolutely, it would have made no difference at all. The feudal relationship overrides the family relationship. It would have been formal, witnessed, probably done in a manor court or before neighbours, and treated as a legally binding act.
Here's a look at some previous episodes. Check out episode 56 for family history within the sound of Bow Bells. Episode 63 was family history in a deserted medieval village. Episode 65 discussed the Neville inheritance dispute. And go to episode 71 for the evaluation of evidence. Here's the latest news from Malcolm Noble's Talk Genealogy podcast.
Malcolm Noble has written a practical introduction to medieval genealogy, over 400 pages, covering the sources, their history, and important chapters on evaluation and analysis of evidence, scaling research pathways, and much, much more. Order your pre-publication copy now from Malcolm Noble at rocketmail.com.
So when we want to look at the mother and daughter dynamic, this is where the charter becomes truly fascinating. And remember, we're talking here about those 42 words. No other evidence are we dealing with. We have the mother acting as a feudal lord. It is not common, though not unheard of, for a mother to take homage from her daughter. The fact that she does so tends to indicate that Matilda is exercising real authority. She is not simply passing down land informally. She is using feudal tools to shape her daughter's future. This is a moment of genuine female agency in a male legal world. By requiring homage and service, Matilda ensures that the land remains tied to her authority. It cannot be absorbed into a future husband's estate, and she retains leverage over future developments. So this is not just a mother giving a gift, it is a landholder structuring a tenancy. One strong possibility is that Matilda was preparing her daughter for marriage. A daughter entering a marriage with a toft, a defined tenancy and clear obligations is far more secure. And remember, following this ceremony, the land cannot be absorbed into the future husband's estate. By retaining superiority, Matilda ensures that the husband cannot claim the land outright, the property remains in the maternal line, and the Claypole Hospital network remains intact. The charter hints of a household where the father is dead, the mother manages the estate, and the daughter is being integrated into that management. This is a moment of intergenerational transmission of authority.
Don't forget, if everyone asked a friend to follow the podcast, we'd double our listeners overnight. Now it's time for tonight's quiz.
Right now, you have sent in one or two comments, which I just want to answer. I want to reassure you that if I choose some questions which are a little bit trickier than the others, it's not because I want to catch you out. It's nice if you think, you know, that's new to me. Yeah, I've learnt something. So here we go then. Question 2. Oh, where are we then?
Question 1.
Right, I see. Okay. Easy one to start off with. Who wrote the parish chest? Very important book in English genealogy, written shortly after World War II, but very relevant. Who wrote the parish chest?
Here's the second question in tonight's quiz.
Now, when you want to estimate the age of a hedge, what is the calculation? Okay, how many woody species do you look for in how many yards?
And now question 3.
There were 12 Eleanor crosses, which mark the resting place on Queen Eleanor's funeral cortege, but only 3 survive. What are those 3? What are the 3 surviving Eleanor crosses? That's 3 questions. That's pretty good, isn't it?
And now, on with the episode.
Even a single clause, even these 42 words, tells us something about the village. It is a toft-based nucleated settlement. A toft is a house plot with a yard and outbuildings. Its presence suggests a compact village, an open field agriculture, a mixed economy of crops and livestock, and a structured rural community. Now, yes, these are only suggestions. Well, they're more than suggestions, they're indications, and very strong indications at that. The phrasing tells us that it has a layered hierarchy. It contains a local lord who's superior, free tenants like Matilda, subtenants like Isolde, customary tenants below them, the villains and the cotters, and then the landless labourers. Matilda sits in the upper middle tier of this hierarchy. The charter's formulaic language suggests that she had access to a clerk or priest, familiarity with the documentary culture, and a community that values written proof. This is not a marginal settlement. Now, I am drawing these inferences just from that passage, although if I come clean, I've got to say that I have subsequently identified who the Uncle John was, and he was actually a clerk with that sort of background. And of course, the grant also gives Isolde not only economic security, but she now has a place in the village and a foothold in the family estate, very much preparing for the next generation. So, what do those 42 words tell us? They tell us that Matilda is not a passive widow, but a skilled estate manager, using tools of feudal law to shape her family's future. She knows what she's doing. Those 42 words tell us that Isolde is not a dependent child, but a tenant, entering into a formal relationship that defines her place in the community. It tells us that the village has a hierarchy, literacy, and a complex web of kingship and landholding. And it tells us that even in a male-dominated legal world, women like Matilda could and did exercise real authority. A tiny clause, a mere 42 words, but inside there's a whole world.
Malcolm Noble's writing about Cambridgeshire includes outrage in Balsham, and Cambridgeshire village disturbs its sleeping death. What made this quiet Tudor parish dig up a grave in their country churchyard? One independent reader has said, "Your research and scholarship is impressive, and you have certainly succeeded in setting out the background to life in Balsham." Outrage in Balsham by Malcolm Noble. A plague in Bleasby. A Nottinghamshire village survives its summer of death. The plague of 1604 reduced the population of Bleasby, Nottinghamshire, by 30%, a demographic deficit that would not recover for 2 generations. Family documents and local records bring detail to this figure, and when placed in the context of broader history, offer an understanding of the village social and economic dynamics. Malcolm Noble's books on Nottinghamshire history include A Plague in Bleasby.
I now want to expand on a very basic level. The Charter gives us multiple independent indicators that Matilda is not a villain. Let's walk us way through it, and we will soon have a clearer image of the village. Villains did not issue charters. Free tenants did that. This is the strongest single indicator of Matilda's position. A villein or customary tenant does not have the legal capacity to alienate land by charter. They cannot grant land to hold in fee and inheritance. They cannot take homage. They cannot warrant land against all men forever, and they certainly cannot create a new tenant beneath them. Yet Matilda has done all these things. The ability to issue a sealed charter is a freeholder's privilege. Villein land is transferred by the manor court, not by charter. Customary land is conveyed by surrendering it into the hands of the lord, admittance by the steward, and entry on the court roll. Matilda's transaction is outside the manor court, done in a private charter with warranty, with heritable freehold, fixed rent, with homage owed to her, not the lord. We're told that the land is to be held in fee and inheritance. Well, villeins cannot hold land in fee. They hold land at the will of the lord, according to the custom of the manor. Fee and inheritance, that's the language of freehold. And most important of all, villeins cannot take homage the way that Matilda does. That is a freeholder's ceremony. A villein simply cannot receive homage, create a tenant, or stand as a feudal superior. But Matilda requires for her homage and service. And probably on a finer point, but in a legal sense, villeins did not have heirs that they could pass property down to. Villeins passed their land by custom, yes, but it's not really the same as inheritance. Now, before we move on, I want to pause and show how we are working on this passage, these 42 words, because none of this is guesswork. It's a reconstruction built from legal logic, knowledge of customary practice, and internal evidence of the charter itself. So let me walk you through some of the reasoning step by step. But here I do just want to draw on the support of some external evidence. Other sources give us the date of this charter in the window 1280 to 1316. But the content of the charter, those 42 words, immediately pushes us towards the early end of that window, because Matilda is doing something that becomes legally problematic after 1219. She is creating a new tenant beneath herself. This is subinfeudation, and after the statute of quia emptores, tenants could no longer create new tenants holding land from them. All new tenants had to hold the land directly to the lord. But Matilda is very clearly granting land, retaining superiority, and requiring homage and service from her daughter. This is classic pre-1290 behaviour. Other documents tell us it's between 1280 and 1316, and the legal logic points us strongly to 1280 to 1290, probably the mid-1280s. Now let us just consider a bit more carefully Isolde's age. The charter treats Isolde as someone who can enter into a feudal relationship, owe a service, and perform homage, now or soon after. This tells us that she is not a small child. Could she be 12? Technically, yes. 12 is the minimum age at which a girl could hold land and marry. But if she were 12, the charter would normally name a guardian or defer homage until she has reached full age. It does neither. So Isolde almost certainly is older than 12, and probably considerably older. The realistic range is 14 to 25 if the charter is 1285, although that the back window can stretch if the charter is slightly later. She could be 18 to 30, say. This gives us a birth window of roughly 1260 to 1272, and I have nudged towards 1268. From Isolde's birth, we can infer that her parents married before that birth. So if they married before 1268, then Matilda likely would have married between 1255 to 1267, say. So she was probably born 1240 to 1250. Okay, very rough pen sketches, but based on the evidence. This places her in the mid-30s to mid-40s at the time of the charter, exactly the age when a widow managing an estate would think of preparing her daughter for adult life. William's death, of course, must precede the charter because Matilda identifies herself as a widow. So William must have died before the charter was issued. If the charter is 1286, then William's death likely falls in the 1275 to 1285 range. This would give Matilda to settle into widowhood, take control of her dower lands, and reorganise the estate. The family relationships help anchor the generation. Matilda calls herself the niece of John of Claypole. This tells us that John is a generation older, so probably born 1212 to 1230, and is either still alive or recently deceased. This perfectly fits with Matilda's birth in the 1240s and Isolde's in the 1260s. The time and tenure confirms that the grant is a freehold held by homage and service created by sub-infeudation. This is the classic pattern of late 13th century free socage. After 1290, such arrangements become very rare or legally impossible. So again, the evidence points to the 1280s. So putting it all together, by combining the legal structure of the grant and the age and threshold of the homage and the likely date of the charter, generations spacing implied by the term niece, and the social logic of a widow preparing her daughter for marriage, we arrived at a coherent, historically grounded though unproven timeline. Matilda, born 1240 to 1250, married 1255 to 1267. Isolde, born 1260 to 1268. William dies 1275 to 1285. The charter is then issued 1280 to 1290, when Isolde is a young adult at the time of the grant. Now that we've reconstructed a plausible timeline for Matilda, William of Hospel, and their daughter Isolde, the natural question becomes, where do we go next? Well, very much depends on where we want to go, but initially we should start looking for corroboration, context, and connections. The 3 C's: corroboration, context, and connections. So if we can find court rolls, records of custom, or presentments and amercements, then they might reveal to us Matilda being listed as a widow holding a toft, Isolde listed as a tenant after Matilda's death, the overlord of the village, the exact services owed for the holding, and whether homage by women was normal in this particular manner. And this could lead us to confirming the type of tenure, almost certainly 3 socage, the date we've discussed, and the family's standing in the hierarchy. Now we may want to research the kinship network between the Claypoles and the Hospels. To do this, we would need to find out about John of Claypole, Matilda's unnamed parents being John's sibling, William Hospel and other Claypoles and Hospels in the neighbouring villages. To find that, we're going to look at feats of fines, lay subsidy rolls, poll tax returns less likely, ecclesiastical cartularies, very useful, and local taxation records in 97, 1301 and 1327, I think. Here we might find evidence of Matilda's siblings or Isolde's siblings, other marriages linking the two families. And just to let you know that all this can be worthwhile, it was the court rolls and the ecclesiastical cartulary that eventually revealed the identity of Matilda's uncle, John of Claypole, and siblings on both sides. And it also told us an awful lot about different land holdings. Because although both surnames were actually place names based on different villages, they were 2 days' travel apart. But what that did do was encourage me to look for those surnames in other villages, and eventually found it in a neighbouring abbey. In doing all this, you're trying to find all the time a manor, and also which ecclesiastical jurisdiction applies. Those are the important signposts. Now, the bit I was especially interested in was trying to uncover the local customs regarding women's property rights in this particular manor. Matilda's authority throughout this story seems to have been striking, and to understand it fully, I wanted to get hold of the local customs to find if it was frequent or customary. Did widows hold free bench or dower? Could they subinfeudate freely? Did daughters inherit equally with sons? Was homage by women normal or exceptional? And to all of those things, you're quite right, we need to go to the manor court records, evidence of customs, local legal treaties like the charter that we've just examined, and comparative studies of regional customs throughout the area. All the time, I myself was looking to see whether Matilda's behaviour was typical for the manor or evidence of a particularly strong and well-connected woman. And I'm still building up the picture of that. But I guess the ultimate goal is to follow what happened to the future generations, Isolde and her siblings. Well, to do that, we need to look closely at the properties to see if there are any charters involving that same tuft of land transferring in the next 200 years. This is a long and involved task. It's going to take us a couple of years to do it. We'll be looking at the court rolls, seeing if her husband is named as a tenant in the right of his wife. We'll look at taxation records where they survived. It's not really the age for wills and probate records. That comes about 150 years later. But we will be looking at ecclesiastical records. What would be nice was to find Isolde's marriage. Her wedding is unlikely, but we might find evidence that she got married. Her children, and whether the tuft stayed in the family. To summarise the second part of tonight's podcast, where is the roadmap? Where is all this taking us? 1, we find the manor. We've got to find which manor we're talking about. Easy enough if we know the village, and we can go to the TNA. Search manorial records. So we find the manor, we search manorial records, We reconstruct, as we've done tonight, the kingship networks that those documents tell us, and we study local customs and trace what happened to the later generations.
Before we go, here's the answers to the quiz.
And the answers were: The Parish Chess was written by W.E. Tate. Easy one to start off with. You're looking for 3 woody species in every 30 yards. Calculates 100 years. So if you have 6 woody species in 30 yards, then that hedge would be something like 200 years old. Now, people do dispute this, okay? And I've got to say, it works more in the Midlands and the east of England than in the southern counties. But that was that's the traditional way of doing it. And there are 3 surviving Eleanor crosses. They are Geddington, Hardingstone, that's in Northamptonshire, and Waltham Cross.
It's time to check out the blog. What have you been posting, Malcolm?
Yeah, well, now we've given you the answers to the questions, I can say that I have actually been posting a blog recently on how to calculate the age of a hedgerow. So take a look at that at talkgenealogy.com.
Here's the latest news from Malcolm Noble's Talk Genealogy podcast.
Yeah, I think we've got some good ones coming up. One that I really enjoy doing is going to be episode 93, which is Metroland and researching your family history. Always fascinated, by Metroland, especially the advertising posters. Got a nice one on the Aldgate Pump. Ooh, I say. What has the Aldgate Pump got to do with family history? Let's explore that in episode 92. In episode 91. Then we've got Borough English. Hello, what's that all about? That's episode 90, which will take you into the organisation of cities and how that can perhaps confuse a family tree. So it's important stuff, a bit remote, but it's important stuff. And then we've got a nice interesting one coming up. This is episode 92, which is portraits of our ancestors. And okay, we do look at the major portraits, but we also just sort of test a question of if there's a painting of a miller in the village, is that your ancestor? Is that your miller? Or is it just an imaginary figure done by the painter? We get into all that, okay? So what's that? That's 5 nice episodes coming up. Hope you'll be there to listen to them. And by the way, if ever you want to check out the episode page on our podcast, I do post upcoming episodes as well as those that have already been published. Check out the website for latest news, a little bit about myself on the Malcolm Noble page. Then we've got the list of episodes, the list of books that I've published. There's a contact page and a bibliography of books that we've mentioned in the series. I've also started putting on episode notes for each podcast, and that's getting a little bit of attention. Got a bit of a blog, as you know, and a page dedicated to the new book, Practical Introduction to Medieval Genealogy. So there's plenty to look at there. Hope you'll take a look. Now is the time in the podcast when we like to look over our shoulder and hear what we were talking about in a previous episode. And I have chosen episode 68, where we were looking at the Bio Inquest. Now, what were we talking about? Let's take a listen.
Horace Round, the Victorian genealogist, rediscovered the charter probably in the 1880s and certainly before 1892, although to stress it had never truly been lost. And on close study he realised that it could not be contemporaneous because many of the holding knights were already dead. In his essay he went into great detail with repeated examples, but That was his style when proving a point. And his work did lead to a revised view of the Charter, which is still largely accepted today. Now, I've already...
Oh, I can remember recording that like it was yesterday, and yet it was 30 episodes ago. Goodness me, there we were, the fire inquest.
Don't forget, if everyone asked a friend to follow the podcast, we'd double our listeners overnight.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Malcolm Noble, and if you've enjoyed tonight's podcast, then you are the genealogist with too much time on your hands.
The Talk Genealogy podcast is posted at 5 minutes to midnight on the third Thursday of each month. Thanks to Freeze Effects for the music and Momna Yunus and Emily Brooks for the voiceovers. This podcast comes from the corner of a country lane in the middle of England.
I want to thank you for listening to tonight's episode and wish you all the best with your family tree hunting. Good night to you, and thanks for listening.
And good night from Momna.